Hello and welcome. I have noticed there are two little lights, so I'm double checking I've turned the microphone on today. Then I won't have to do this twice. I think when I was working with a carpenter once, one of his expressions was measure twice, cut once. And that was a very good practical example of mindfulness in action. Giving some thought to our actions prior to acting them out prevents mistakes. Another good way of explaining sati sampajana that I was talking about the other day. And continuing with your comments and questions, one here, what about cutting grass? Like with a lawnmower. There are a whole bunch of insects that might be caught in it, even though there is no intention of hurting them. Would one that is keeping five precepts just let the grass grow? So these precepts are intention based. If it is your intention to cut the grass without causing any harm, or as little as possible, then it's okay. Monks and nuns, monastics, are prevented in their rules from carrying out any gardening activities, so pruning trees, cutting flowers, digging holes, turning the soil. Two reasons for that: in order to avoid any accidental killing, because albeit unintentional, we want to try and avoid it as far as possible. And of course we are, as you know, inevitably, without intention, going to cause some harm. We cannot walk around in life without accidentally causing harm beneath our feet. The Jains, which predates Buddhism by some time and still exist in India today, literally walk around with a soft broom in front of them, sweeping, so that anything that may be on the ground won't get damaged by their feet. And some even wear masks to prevent breathing in any microscopic flying insects. This is making it a little impractical to live. And you say, could you just let the grass grow? Yes, if you are able to. This is a great way of letting nature just take its course. Now, of course, you're probably speaking from the West, where they have lawns and things like that need trimming. Otherwise, they're no longer lawns. They're just wild gardens. Now, in hot countries, there isn't so much in the way of lawns. In fact, they're very rare. There are some here around the touristy hotel parts, but it does take some upkeep for the people looking after those, because they're not natural to this climate. But nature itself will just take care of itself and requires little of man's intervention, other than what man intervenes to do to try and improve the environment for themselves. So in answer to your question, on 5 precepts, as long as you are relatively careful, you just mow the lawn as normal. And it is not your intention, like when you're driving the car, to kill anything on your journey. But many insects will hit the windshield, hit the headlamps. You'll see them when you get back, stuck to this is why you have to clean your car. A lot of this is flying insects and things like that. So precepts are intention based. I think I already said this yesterday, if you accidentally tread on an ant, it's an accident. It's neutral karma. But if you swat a mosquito, that's intentional killing. This is the difference. And how can people who are still stuck in the education system transition to monastic life? What steps would you recommend for someone in this position to begin their journey towards becoming a monk? Well, it really depends where you are. My monastery, where I ordained, is an education system. It's a recognized educational establishment in India, and is advancing towards university status. So there are people in full-time education from the age of about 8 upwards of that in the monastery who are monks. And that's one way. Move to India or a country that has such facilities. But if you're in the ordinary educational system, then essentially you aren't able to ordain fully as a monk until you are aged 20. So you can ordain at any age as a monk, firstly as a novice, samanera, from the age where you're old enough to scare a crow, is the expression used. This is basically walking around and being able to wave your arms about and communicate. However, you cannot ordain as a bhikkhu, take upasampada, higher ordination, until you are of the age of 20 years old. Now, normally speaking, education, standard education, has finished by that age. So it doesn't mean you are stuck in education because you cannot ordain fully until you've finished your education. Well, you've reached the age of 20 anyway. And also education is important. It might have no relevance if you're going to become a monk, but you are exercising this muscle of a brain, the thinking brain, although I perhaps don't give it so much importance when I'm referring to intellectualizing the Buddha's teachings and making it too complicated, as I quite often do. That doesn't mean we become lazy and think there's no need to learn anything. We still need to, even as we get older and have finished education, continue to expand our knowledge and learn by way of exercising the thinking brain in order to use it in its capacity to understand and develop real true wisdom. And I think there's another question coming up with regards to what is wisdom, so I won't go into that too much now. But how can people who are I don't think there is anyone stuck. They're very lucky and fortunate to be being educated. So I'm not going to ever suggest that anybody who is in full-time education should leave it to ordain. Well, they can't ordain until they're 20 anyway. They can, of course, if they're in a country that has novice monks, so you can ordain very young. They can do it that way, but then usually those monasteries, of whatever tradition they are educational establishments in themselves, for obvious reasons. They are legally obliged to educate all children. Most countries these days have a national curriculum. So there we go. You're not stuck in education, you're very fortunate to have education. That's what I'd say to that, really. And I'm not belittling your ambition there by saying that. I'm just saying recognize that and then develop patience towards your ambition of becoming a monk or nun, because this is very much developing your skills that will be very needed when you do ordain. So you're developing patience. Where do you live in Sri Lanka? Which city, which village, which monastery? So I live in Bentota on the west coast of Sri Lanka, somewhere south of Colombo, north of Galle. And that is it. I don't live in a monastery because there's no other monks here, or one of the temples. There is one literally the other side of this wall or old broken down building that's beside me, so not far away, and there are many surrounding me, but I live in a little kuti alone in order to practice, free from the daily activities that the monks here are quite busy doing all of the time. Some of those indeed are educational establishments also, so you can imagine there's a lot to do. If you want precise details, you can just look on Google Maps, English Buddhist Monk, and it's there. Can elderly people, oh, we've just had the young ones, okay, so can elderly people of 60 plus become monk? So, as I said, there's a age restriction, only one, and that is you have to be at least 20 years old to take upasampada, higher ordination, to become a bhikkhu. At the other end, no, there is no age limit, and elderly, 60. Well, I think I'm 57 this year, so I'm only 3 years off 60. So, does that mean I'm elderly? There is no limit. Yes, the answer is yes, any age, but it depends on the monastery and the country you're in, because I know Western monasteries have a cut-off limit of, it used to be when I first considered ordaining, it was 50, and I was nearly coming up for 50 or something. I was in my 40s anyway, and I thought, well, it could take a long time. But certainly in Asia, you see old people having become, when they're children, their responsibilities have reduced, and even older than 60, and they have no, they may still have a partner, but it's quite acceptable. It's the third stage of life. I think they have childhood, bachelorhood, adulthood, and then going to be some religious seekerhood, if you like, phases. Those are the Indian, I think it's an Indian structure of their culture. So it's not unheard of that people older than 60 in India go off to some religion or another to just concentrate on that and leave the worldly life behind them. But generally speaking, it's really more important to give consideration to your health, your ability, physical ability, to sustain long hours of just practice and not receive or need much in the way of medical care or assistance, other than very basic requirements with the odd injury or illness that you might get. But if you have conditions already that require special food or diets or special comfortable adaptations of furniture and this and that, then it's rather too late. So you might need to wait till the next lifetime for you to have the opportunity to ordain. And also the reasoning behind that is not just out of compassion for you, but it's for the Sangha. They are not places they will have to and do out of duty, but because they want to look after their own. So monks who become old, sick and die, as we all do, we need to look after them. They're our brothers, they're within the Sangha. Now, if people came who were already old and prone to sickness, then there would be an abundance, and it would become a healthcare system as opposed to a practicing Sangha, because as you can imagine, it would become top heavy with sickness, and that isn't the idea behind the Sangha. It's to enable people to practice fully. So it's looked at carefully in that sense. But also, the older you are, the very much harder it is to break down the kilesas, because they've become more established. Unless you've been practicing very diligently for a long time as a lay person, so most of your life, in which case you will have a better grounding. But if you're just coming to Buddhism late in life, then you have there's an expression, you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can, but it's a lot harder. And it's the same with us. It's a lot harder for me to have renounced, to have become a monk, to live in communities where many of my teachers, superiors, people telling me what to do and how to do it, were considerably younger than not only myself, some of them younger even than my children. This can be difficult, especially from people from the West, like myself, to deal with. You have to really have a lot of humility and be open to really letting go to any preconceived ideas. And the older you are, the more difficult that can be. Okay. I understand Sukhi means peaceful, as I'm Indian. I don't know Hontu. So I say Sukhi Hotu. It is spelled Hontu, but Sukhi Hotu is be happy, really. sukhi, it's not really peaceful in the Pali word. It means happiness. Like sukha is happiness, the opposite of dukkha. So dukkha is suffering, sukha is pleasure and happiness. And sukhi is the way we say it in this context. Hotu means be, or you be. So may you be happy. So when I say sukhi hotu, I'm saying may you be happy. And also well, but you know, it's that's implied. Specifically, grammatically, it just means happy. Oh, a correction. I referred to a book, The Word of the Buddha. I said by Bhikkhu Nyanamoli. Actually, it's Bhikkhu Nyanatiloka. I always mix them up, but they lived together in the island hermitage, which is an island monastery on a lake, or a big wide part of the river, just north of Gaul, not far from here. It was a monastery in the 1950s, that a German monk, Bhante Nyana, well, venerable here, Bhante Nyanatiloka, was establishing a forest tradition, and he wrote the book, The Word of the Buddha. He was accompanied or joined by a British monk called Bhante Nyanamoli, and Nyanamoli Bhikkhu was famous for his translations. He was a famous translator of the Visuddhimagga and various other famous publications. So that were in the Pali language, he became a good translator. So sorry about that, I mixed the two up, I often do. But they lived around the same time in the same monastery here in Sri Lanka on the island hermitage there. I was contacted by a Western monk who's staying there currently, just recently. So it's interesting to know that that's the case. I'm happy to hear that, because I think up until recently it's been mainly just local Sri Lankans living there. It's no longer the main sort of forest monastery here in Sri Lanka. They're at another location somewhere in the north of the country. Not these particular monks, they've died in the 1960s, a long time ago. So that was just a correction, clarification. Bhante, can you explain why religion says to meditate? So religion doesn't generally say to meditate. Most organized religions are suggesting you pray. So you focus your attention, I suppose, with praying on requesting for assistance from your God or whomever it is you're supposedly praying to. And I think it's really meditations only from some Eastern religions and philosophies, a way of practice. But in Buddhism, it is very much the primary path towards freedom from suffering in this lifetime. It is the medicine, if you like, that is prescribed to cure our suffering, our illness of greed, hatred, and delusion. So this is why Buddhism suggests we meditate, for that reason, to make us free from suffering, to help eradicate the kilesas of greed, hatred, and delusion, lobha, dosa, moha. So I hope that's clear enough. And are Theravada monks allowed to use sunscreen? And also kindly elaborate on 7th and 8th precept, sleeping on a bed. So, I mean, not Theravada monks, any Buddhist monks follow really the same precepts and Vinaya, Patimokkha, 227 rules. And in the time of the Buddha, there wasn't really sunscreen, but we don't really go out in the sun. We live under the shade of a tree in a cave or in the forest, and if we do, there are rules pertaining to it, but we can use such a thing like this umbrella. It's been used for the rain this morning, but it's just as good as a sunshade. There's no need for sunscreen particularly. If you were going to have a bare head, and bear in mind it's bald, shaved, it might be an idea. If someone offers you sunscreen, it would be considered as medicine, come under a requisite of medicine, one of the 4 requisites. And it mightn't be a bad idea, because actually if you're with senior monks, unless they cover their heads, and usually you're the one doing that, holding the parasol or umbrella, and you might have your head exposed to the sun quite for a long time in these hot countries. So I really recommend that you do put some sunscreen on your head. Rather too late for me. I've been in these places for far too long and never really bothered with the stuff. Just don't hang around too much in the sun if you can avoid it, because apart from sunscreen or sunburn and potential skin cancer, you're going to get sunstroke here. You for sure do. If you stay in the sun for more than 5 or 10 minutes, it's quite hot and you don't feel very well at all. So that's anyway, that's the rules for all monks and nuns, not just Theravada. The 7th and 8th precept. So 6 is food. 7 covers not using entertainment. It also covers using makeup, beautification, bangles, malas it specifically says, but wearing necklaces, adornments in essence. But primarily it's given consideration to the aspect of entertainment, so one doesn't go to musical shows or watch movies or even really read novels or something like that when you're keeping the 7th precept. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory. And with regards to the 8th precept, sleeping on a bed, actually the wording is sleeping in high and luxurious places. Now the specific Vinaya rule is, I said just the other day, a bed with that's more than 2 hands breadths, so got legs more than 8 inches above the floor, but it's really referring to high and luxurious, so thick mattresses and very comfortable and opulent surroundings, this kind of thing. It's to avoid all that kind of encouragement to be lazy, to be laying around. But I think it should be when lay people who are using the 8 precepts as a way of developing their practice on occasions as opposed to continuously, should be applied, because of course they're going to only just manage this for 24 hours maybe, and they probably would need to just go to sleep in their ordinary bed. They're not going to get rid of furniture for just the day. But I think it applies to more what you're sitting on and lounging around on or in during the day. And this really, because the only time you used furniture to sit and lie around in the day, when in the Buddha's time, was at night time when you went to bed. The rest of the time the floor is good enough, as it still is for most people, a lot of people in Asian countries. So it was specifying high and luxurious. So anything to do with sofas or big armchairs and these kind of things you should consider as being covered by the 8th precept. So many monks in monasteries these days are sleeping on beds. They're not high and they just have thin mattresses, but they have pillows and things like that. I chose, through my own just interpretation of the rules, to just sleep on the floor, because I found it's better for my practice. It means that I sleep less, and you sleep eventually, when you get used to it, very well, because you sleep just for, say, 4 to 6 hours, but you sleep very well. You're not going to move around much because you can't roll, because I sleep on this sort of concrete floor here, just on a cloth, and that's enough. So that's what's that one? I do wonder about the sage incense that's burning in the background. Is it a ritual thing? Does it hold any significance? Since listening to music or entertaining yourself is not part of the monastic lifestyle, then isn't this incense just another distraction? So I don't know what's burning on in the background. It's not always the same thing. It might be these like incense, but for keeping the flies and mosquitoes away, or I could be just burning some rubbish from my mealtime, which we're not allowed to have big bonfires, so we can just put it in a little container free from any insects, and it's only a small amount, light it with the candle or the incense so that it just burns away. Yes, I mean, it's not so much very entertaining. Firstly, it is part of the puja, the ritual, or which isn't so much a ritual, but it's a dedication, an offering, paying homage to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, whereby they offer light, which is candles, incense, which are incense, just that, and flowers. Now, incense are nice because it does keep a nice, pleasant smell. It's a very powerful sense, our sense of smell, and very often in these places the surrounding smells aren't very pleasant, so it's quite nice if you're burning jasmine incense or sandalwood, not really by way of any distraction, and it's not very entertaining. But the real practical reason behind any smoke you see is I'm offered a lot of incense, so they're available, and I burn them because smoke is a great purifier, not in some spiritual mystical way. It does purify the air. These are very humid and therefore become very mouldy sort of environments. Lots of mold in your clothes can occur, and in the walls where they're always damp, in the floor and anything, and even on your body. But smoke purifies that. It's an antibiotic. No, antiseptic. Smoke in itself is antiseptic by nature. So you see in little houses here, they go around doing this puja holy thing with all this burning, possibly this sage you're referring to. It's not sage in my case. I don't have access to this. I only can burn what I'm offered, which is incense. So they go around with all this smoke in the little cafes and the shops and the houses and everywhere. It is part of a ritual for most people, but it has a real practical use too. It stops your walls and everything getting mouldy, and keeps everything fresh. It's not something that you'd really be used to in Western countries, or people are used to in Western countries, which are very smoke-free these days. I know when I went back to England, and I hadn't been to the railway station, Waterloo, for many years, and I couldn't believe it. It was like brand new. I thought I'd landed in Lego land. I mean, if you know what Lego is, it's a children's toy. You make buildings and cities or whatever out of these plastic bricks, and it's all very pristine and clean and unreal, very plastic. And I thought, wow, I was in London and Waterloo, and I went to some other places. Everything seemed like a Lego version of the London I was used to, because the previous visit to London, and I didn't live far from away, but I've been travelling, so I was prior to when they stopped people, even a lot of it's just people smoking, smoking cigarettes, when everything was just brown, and that's what I thought everything was always. Well, it's like that here, not because people are smoking, but you have smoke. So yeah, it's not an entertainment, it's not a distraction, it's not a ritual. And you wonder, yeah, so that's answered that. I think it comes up again in a minute. My question is on meditation. I do meditate almost every day, but I use guided meditations to do so. I've heard you speak on just sitting silently and following the breath. Is this something I should do instead, or maybe in addition to guided meditation? So think of guided meditation. When you're learning to ride a bicycle, you have stabilizers, or learning to swim, you have a float. And once you can swim, once you can ride your bicycle, you take away the stabilizers, or you leave the float behind you. Occasionally, you might fall off the bicycle, or you might sink, and you need to try again. But once you've developed the skill to meditate, you won't require guided meditation. It's a training aid. It's an assistance. So there could be times when you're feeling a little bit distracted and you feel it might help, But don't be too tempted to fall back on that, because it's like feeling lazy on your bicycle, putting the stabilizers back on, or swimming with a float again. It's perhaps just easier. Well, the purpose of meditation is not for it to be easy, nor is it for it to be hard or a punishment. But when you develop the skill to absorb into deep samadhi relatively quickly, then it's neither of those things. It's just peace and tranquility, but can only be attained without any other external source of distraction or occupation of your mind. Distraction, entertainment in a way. So guided meditations can be a little bit habitual, like listening to music or a form of entertainment, especially some of them which aren't just someone speaking from a place of wisdom, but are incorporating special sounds, let's say. They might be music, or it might be special sounds that are supposed to assist. This is all additional extras, which might be very pleasant, but this isn't the purpose of meditation. You should be able to practice meditation in any location, any time, anywhere. So this without anything, and nothing that can run out. It's always available to you then, and this is the purpose. It is then part of your very being. From the minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep, in a way, you are meditating if you're keeping mindfulness throughout all of your daily activities. So once you've enabled yourself to understand the point of meditation, the goal, and appreciate a little bit of what it has to offer, then you should slowly perhaps stop using the guided meditation and just meditate in silence, watching the breath, as you say. Okay, it's quite a long question, so we'll go through it carefully, if I can read it carefully. About wisdom. I don't understand. Good actions and meditation create a sound mind and environment, but how does that generate wisdom? When Buddha was enlightened, did he grasp it or did he receive it? When he had wisdom on a teaching, did he say he received wisdom or he created the wisdom itself? Where is wisdom? Is it locked away and we've always had it in our minds? Is it some sort of silent communication? Can I think of wisdom thoughts without doing this? I think not. So is wisdom-based understanding? If so, how can I understand another without having their experience? Well, obviously by wisdom, but how? Okay, so there's about 1 million questions there, but really you're asking about wisdom. Not 1 million, sorry for the exaggeration, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of questions there in one. The reason you're not understanding wisdom is because that is not what wisdom is. The Buddha didn't have to use intellect or Yes, the Buddha didn't have to use intellect or receive it. The wisdom we're referring to in Panya. So we have sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, which you refer to. Moral virtue and meditation develops wisdom. It's not intellectual knowledge. It's not even knowing the suttas, the word of the Buddha. It is an understanding, a knowing of the truth. So in terms of Panya as wisdom, it is seeing. It is becoming awakened to. So the Buddha means awakened one or awakened. So the Buddha was awakened because he saw the truth, that there's suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. He didn't read about it, learn it. He didn't even just practice it and find out and then write it down and take that as what he taught. He saw what was the truth. the truth of existence, the characteristics of existence of anicca, impermanence, or lack of certainty, dukkha, suffering, or unsatisfactoriness, and anatta, not self, or everything being out of our control. Look at it that way. He saw this. Now these are just facts, these are truths that you see, and it goes no further. You can't expand on that more than the depth of your understanding, or more importantly, the lack of doubt that that is the truth. Once you see truth, in fact, once you know truth, you cannot unknow it, you cannot unsee it. So even when your mental faculties disappear, if you have dementia of some kind, you won't lose the knowledge that you'll know you've lost all of your mental faculties. You'll know that you cannot retain information anymore. That knowing also knows that there is impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and that is out of our control. By the very fact that it's seeing the very difference there and then, in that present moment in time. It may not remember it in the next moment, it will just see that clearly again as being the facts and the truth. That is wisdom. So how can you know this wisdom from good actions and meditation? By that means. By good actions we mean moral virtue, which enables meditation. That in itself doesn't generate wisdom. You in fact need some wisdom in order to understand that you require to be morally virtuous in order to be able to meditate well, without distractions of regret or guilt or any of these horrible negative emotions that may affect your ability to relax your mind, have it calm. Then the meditation itself will enable you to see clearly the nature of existence, which is what we're gaining wisdom in. Wisdom is understanding in this sense. So I hope that explains what we mean by panya. Once again, we're looking here at trying to use words to explain something that cannot be explained by the use of words. The taste of water. Explain that to someone who's never tasted water. The colour of a banana, yellow. Without comparison, explain that to somebody who's never seen yellow. But once you've tasted water, once you've seen a banana, you understand. That is wisdom. Have you successfully transcended ignorance, fear, and desire? Or are there still moments where you feel confused, anxious, or... I won't say the next word. So monks don't talk about their own attainments in their practice or advancements on the path towards Nibbana, and encourage others, really, not to inquire of others either about their progress, but to concentrate on your own eradication of the defilements. That is what you're talking about here, by transcending ignorance, which is delusion. It's slightly different, as I explained yesterday. Ignorance is not knowing, delusion is knowing but not understanding what you know. Fear is usually another replaced word for hatred, not liking, hatred. So greed, hatred and delusion. Greed, desire, you say here. So I think you're referring to lobha, dosa, moha, greed, hatred and delusion. These defilements, the kilesas, that the whole of this practice is designed to reduce and eradicate. So whether or not I have transcended them, or I haven't, shouldn't matter to anyone practicing for themselves, which is what they're doing, to eradicate them for themselves. But I think yesterday I spoke of anger when someone asked, when was the last time I got angry or annoyed? And I said, oh, well, a few minutes ago, because we still have these emotions. Everybody has emotions arise that you just don't need to act upon or express. So you might be angry, but you don't have to act upon it or express the fact that you're angry. So externally, you may appear quite calm, but eventually with the eradication of these defilements, even the arising of that anger will not happen, but only in the final stages of enlightenment does that really become possible. So very advanced practitioners, almost on the verge of arahantship, in fact arahantship almost, will have attained the level of transcendence that you're referring to here. So I hope I've answered that ambiguously enough without avoiding the question. When I thought about becoming a monk, one of the things which which I just read it as it is, which couldn't stop to worry me was the case of Nanavira Terra. That must be a Sinhalese monk. The thought of contracting some kind of stomach problem, which with offered food in tropical countries is not so hard, ruining the meditation practice just because you cannot stop focusing on your health issue. So someone worried about becoming a monk and getting offered food and it giving them I don't know the monk you're referring to, I'm afraid, or his story, but we're going to get old, we're going to get sick, we're going to die. We're going to die. Whether that comes as a result of eating some dodgy food, bad food, doesn't matter. You could get bitten by a snake, a poisonous snake. There's all manner of things can happen to you here, but so can they wherever you are. We had this pandemic not so long ago when people couldn't even go outside of their front door without the fear of dying. So you don't need to be worrying about things like that. If you wish to become a monk, you can just become a monk. If you have that opportunity, a triviality like that, one monk's story, where he became ill, you're saying, and then couldn't concentrate on his meditation because of his illness. It's because he wasn't meditating correctly. Clearly, your meditation, whether you're ill, if you've been meditating for a long time, it's no good starting once you're already ill, then you've developed considerably, you've developed freedom from those kilesas, and you will deal with illness in a very manageable way. It will become part of your meditation, part of your practice without difficulty. It won't be an obstacle, it won't be an obstruction. If it is, then you haven't been practicing well up to that point. This is partly the reason why there's no point starting a monastic career with the pre-existing illnesses. In fact, you're not allowed. It's part of the ordination process that you need to be healthy. You can't have, unless they're very easily manageable within the use of the requisites we have, and that's all, which isn't much, then those any pre-existing conditions would mean you wouldn't be able to ordain anyway. So don't worry about such a thing. It's just a story anyway, I'm sure. It's perhaps something that's taken out of context there too and made too much of a point of. So just quick, I won't read out the whole question here, forgive me for that because it was a bit long, but about rituals and pujas and bowing to the Buddha and incense and flowers and candles. You've seen a lot of this going on with monks, also offering the braid, the cord that gets tied around wrists at the end of it, blessing string or blessing cords and things like that. So there is a tendency in anything organized for there to be some formality of these pujas and these rituals and rites. And yes, I think you can see there's a tendency for that to be exploited what rites and rituals really means in this context is not what you're doing, but why you're doing it. Now, if you think by bowing to the Buddha, lighting some candles, lighting some incense and offering a statue some flowers, and in my own monastery, even in India, they offer it a whole plate of food, and here they offer food and fruit and everything to a statue. If you think that's an offering out of respect to our teacher, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, reminding yourself that you're paying homage to the triple gem that you've taken refuge in, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, and you're bowing to that out of humility to that, and that is it, as a mindful practice of reflection to assist with your meditation, your keeping of moral virtue and this development of wisdom, then that's okay. If you think, but by carrying out those activities that your life will improve, you will be lucky, you will get a promotion you've been seeking or pass the exams you've taken, and by having a piece of string around your wrist will be protected, then this is what it has to be abandoned when they say abandoning rites and rituals. So the first stage of enlightenment, sotapanna, is to have no doubt of the Four Noble Truths, about that truth, have abandoned Sakkaya Ditthi, so personality view, knowing that this is just a body made up of elements, and that is it. It is only a result of causes and conditions, and the abandonment of rites and rituals. It doesn't mean you have to stop bowing to the Buddha, which you do out of respect, but it's a mindful reminder. It's a physical reminder of your humility to the teachings and your progress on the path towards enlightenment yourself. If you think of it any more than that, then it becomes considered as what's referred to as rites and rituals. I've forgotten the Pali terminology for rites and rituals, but in English, rites and rituals means equating it like to prayer, that doing all of these pujas, these activities, tying string, is like praying for help, praying for assistance to a higher power. And it is not that. It is purely reflection. And it's a pleasant formality. It's a nice activity to do, a wholesome activity, as long as that intention remains just that, as reflection and not a way of attaining anything else. Because that won't work, because the Buddha teaches us it is up to us only to develop from moral virtue, from meditation and the development of wisdom, to eradicate these defilements. So that's, I think for today, because the next question is rather long, well, it deserves some consideration, I shall bring this to a talk, bring it to an end. I hope there's something useful there that you can use, and if not, don't worry about it, just let it go. Thank you for watching. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.